What if the future you were promised was never meant to save you? What if the real story of science fiction is not wonder but warning? Hidden in the shadows of the 1970s are films that dared to ask dangerous questions. Machines that think, worlds that collapse, creatures that should never exist. These are not forgotten stories. They are signals. And once you start watching, you may not look at the future the same way again. Number 13. The Doomsday Machine, 1972. A countdown has already begun, not on a clock, not on a screen, but inside a dying world that never saw it coming. In the Doomsday Machine, Earth faces annihilation from a secret weapon that escapes control, a massive device, built in silence, designed for power. It becomes the end of everything. A small crew escapes just in time. They board a spacecraft meant for exploration. Instead, it becomes a lifeboat, drifting through emptiness. The mission changes instantly. Survival replaces science. Every conversation carries fear. Every decision feels final. The film leans into Cold War paranoia. It reflects a time when destruction felt close, not distant, not theoretical, but immediate. The tension builds through isolation, through uncertainty, through the quiet realization that there is no home left to return to. What makes this film linger is its simplicity. No spectacle, no distraction, just the weight of consequence. The crew must face a future where humanity is reduced to memory. That idea alone drives the narrative forward. And yet, something deeper hides beneath the surface. A question that never leaves. Was the machine the real threat? Or was it the people who created it? Because sometimes, the end of the world is not caused by enemies. It is caused by choices. Number 12. Equinox, 1970. The forest looks ordinary at first, quiet, still, almost inviting. But in Equinox, that silence hides something ancient. Something that should never be found. A group of friends stumble upon a book, a strange object tied to forces beyond human understanding. The moment they open it, everything changes. This is not just a story about monsters. It is about dimensions colliding, about reality bending in ways the human mind cannot fully process. Creatures emerge from another world, grotesque, unnatural, watching from the edges of perception. The film stands out for its ambition. It reaches beyond its limitations. It tries to show the unseen, the impossible. And in doing so, it creates something unsettling. The horror is not just in what appears, it is in what might exist beyond what we can see. There is a raw energy here, a sense that anything can happen. The characters are not in control. They are reacting, surviving moment to moment. And that unpredictability becomes the film's greatest strength. At its core, this is a story about curiosity, about what happens when boundaries are crossed without understanding the cost. Because once a door is opened, it cannot always be closed, and what waits on the other side is rarely kind. Number 11. The Daytime Ended, 1979. There is something deeply unsettling about a normal home turning into the center of something impossible. In The Daytime Ended, a quiet desert setting becomes the stage for events that defy logic. A family gathers, a routine visit, nothing unusual. Then the world begins to shift. Time fractures without warning. Creatures appear, machines hover, moments collapse into each other. Past and future collide in ways that feel chaotic, yet strangely deliberate. It is not an invasion. It is something more complex, something harder to understand. The film builds its tension through confusion, through the feeling that reality itself is unstable. Characters struggle to make sense of what is happening, but there are no clear answers, only glimpses, only fragments. What makes this story effective is its atmosphere. The desert becomes a place of isolation, a place where help feels distant, where the unknown feels closer than ever. Every strange event pushes the characters further from certainty. There is also a quiet fear running underneath. The idea that time is not fixed, that it can be altered, distorted, even broken. And if that is true, then nothing is truly safe. By the end, the experience feels less like a story and more like a warning, a glimpse into something beyond human control. Number 10. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. The world has already ended, not with a single explosion, but with a slow collapse that left behind dust, silence, and hunger. In A Boy and His Dog, survival is not heroic. It is brutal. It is selfish. It is stripped of everything that once defined civilization. A young man named Vic wanders through the wasteland. His only companion is a telepathic dog named Blood. Their connection is not emotional in the traditional sense. It is practical, necessary. Blood helps Vic find food, more specifically, women. Because in this world, survival has reduced humanity to its most basic instincts. That is where the film becomes uncomfortable. It does not soften its reality. It presents a future where morality has eroded, where trust is rare, where survival demands choices that feel wrong yet inevitable. Then comes the underground society, a place that appears orderly, controlled, even civilized. But beneath that structure lies something deeply disturbing, a rigid system, a manipulation of identity, a version of society that has survived by removing individuality. The contrast between the surface and the underground creates tension. One is chaotic, the other is controlled, yet both are flawed, both are dangerous in different ways. The film forces a question that lingers long after it ends. What does it mean to survive if humanity itself is lost? Because sometimes the cost of staying alive is becoming something unrecognizable. Number 9. Track of the Moon Beast, 1976. It begins with a flash in the sky, a meteor, small, almost insignificant. But in Track of the Moon Beast, that single moment becomes the catalyst for something far more terrifying. Because what falls from space does not just land, it changes what it touches. A man is struck. At first it seems survivable, an accident, an unusual injury. But then the symptoms begin. Nightmares, pain, a slow transformation that he cannot control. His body becomes something else, something predatory. The film leans into a classic science fiction fear, the idea that space carries unknown dangers. Not just physical threats, but biological ones. Forces that can rewrite the human body without permission. There is a quiet tragedy at the center of the story. The man does not choose this fate. He is aware of what is happening, powerless to stop it, watching himself become a creature that hunts under the cover of darkness. The setting adds to the tension. Open landscapes, desert spaces that feel empty yet exposed. There is nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape what is coming. Unlike larger science fiction films of its time, this story remains grounded, personal, focused on the individual rather than the world, and that makes it more unsettling. Because the horror feels close, immediate. It is not about invasion. It is about infection, about transformation, about losing control over your own identity. Number 8. Starship Invasions, 1977. Not all invasions are loud. Not all threats arrive with explosions or visible destruction. In Starship Invasions, the danger is quieter, calculated, hidden behind human faces and controlled movements. Because these visitors do not just arrive, they infiltrate. The story presents a conflict between two alien factions. One seeks control over Earth. The other attempts to stop them. But the real tension comes from how deeply the invasion has already spread. People are no longer just people. Some are something else entirely. Christopher Lee brings a cold authority to the narrative. His presence alone adds weight, a sense that the situation is already slipping beyond human understanding. The film does not rush its reveals. It builds slowly, layer by layer. What makes this story effective is its focus on control, mind control, psychological manipulation. The idea that identity itself can be overridden, that free will can be taken without resistance, that is where the real fear lives. The scale is larger than previous entries. This is not a single transformation or a localized event. This is a coordinated effort, a quiet takeover unfolding in plain sight. There is also a sense of inevitability. The more the characters learn, the more they realize how little power they truly have. The invasion is not beginning. It is already underway. And that realization creates a different kind of tension. Not panic, but dread. Because sometimes the most dangerous threat is the one you cannot see, the one that is already inside. Number 7. The Neptune Factor, 1973. The ocean has always been a mystery, vast, silent, unforgiving. in the Neptune Factor. That mystery becomes something far more dangerous. A scientific team descends into the depths to rescue survivors trapped in an underwater station. It sounds like a mission built on precision and planning, but once they go down, control begins to slip away. The deeper they travel, the more unfamiliar the environment becomes. Pressure increases, visibility fades. The ocean floor reveals strange formations and unexpected life. Creatures that seem almost alien, movements that feel unnatural. The team is no longer just navigating water. They are entering a world that feels separate from everything above. The film plays on isolation. There is no quick escape, no easy return. Every decision carries weight. Every mistake becomes permanent. The submarine becomes both shelter and prison, a thin barrier between survival and crushing darkness. What stands out is the way the unknown is presented, not as immediate terror, but as a slow realization. Something is wrong. Something is watching. The environment itself begins to feel hostile, not through aggression, but through indifference. The rescue mission becomes secondary. Survival takes priority. The team must adapt to conditions they cannot fully understand. Trust becomes fragile. Communication becomes strained. There is a quiet tension running through every scene, a sense that the deeper they go, the further they move from safety, from certainty, from the world they thought they understood. And in that darkness, the idea emerges that Earth still holds secrets that rival anything found in space. Number 6. Genesis 2, 1973. A man falls asleep in one world and wakes up in another. In Genesis 2, time becomes a bridge between two realities. Dylan Hunt is placed in suspended animation during a scientific experiment. When he awakens, centuries have passed. Civilization as he knew it is gone. What remains is fragmented, broken into isolated societies that have evolved in different ways. Some embrace technology, others reject it entirely. The world is no longer unified. It is divided by ideology, by fear, by survival. The underground tunnels become the central image of this new Earth. Networks stretching across continents, once symbols of progress, now relics of a lost age. They connect civilizations that do not trust each other, that do not understand each other. The film explores the idea of rebuilding, not just physically, but morally. What kind of society should rise from the ashes? What values should guide it? These questions drive the narrative forward. There is also a tension between past and future. Dylan represents a world that no longer exists. His knowledge is both valuable and dangerous. He becomes a link to something people have forgotten or chosen to forget. The concept feels expansive. The possibilities seem endless. Yet there is a restraint in how the story unfolds. It focuses on ideas rather than spectacle, on philosophy rather than action. That is what gives it weight. The sense that humanity is not just trying to survive, it is trying to redefine itself. And that process is never simple, never clean, never complete. Number 5. Planet Earth. 1974. The future is not always built on progress. Sometimes it is built on imbalance. In Planet Earth, society has evolved into something unfamiliar. A matriarchal system where power is structured differently, where control is maintained through rules that feel both organized and unsettling. Dylan Hunt returns once again, still navigating a world that does not belong to him. But this time, the conflict is more defined, more personal. He encounters a society that appears stable on the surface, yet beneath that stability lies control, restriction, a carefully maintained order that limits freedom. The film presents a fascinating inversion. Gender roles are reversed, authority is restructured, but instead of presenting this as utopia, it explores the consequences. Power in any form can become oppressive, regardless of who holds it. There is a quiet tension in every interaction. Conversations carry weight. Decisions feel calculated. The society functions, but at what cost? That question lingers throughout. The world itself feels divided. Different communities operating under different rules, different beliefs. There is no single truth, only perspectives shaped by survival. What makes the story compelling is its focus on control, not through violence, but through structure, through expectation, Through systems that shape behavior over time, Dylan remains an outsider, observing, questioning, trying to understand a world that continues to challenge everything he knows. And in that struggle, the film reveals something deeper, that the future is not defined by technology alone. It is defined by the choices people make when given power. Choices that can shape entire civilizations. Number 4. Killdozer, 1974. It begins with something buried, something ancient, something that should have remained untouched. In Killdozer, a group of construction workers arrives on a remote island to carry out a routine operation. Heavy machinery, clear objectives, no expectations of danger. But the moment they dig into the ground, everything changes. They uncover an object unlike anything they have seen, a strange presence, silent yet powerful. It does not move, it does not speak, yet it radiates something unnatural. And then it transfers that force into something far more terrifying, a bulldozer. The transformation is immediate. The machine becomes more than metal, more than gears and fuel. It becomes aware. It begins to act with intent. It hunts. It destroys. It isolates the workers one by one, turning a tool of construction into an instrument of fear. What makes this story effective is its simplicity. There is no complex explanation, no scientific breakdown, just the raw reality of a machine that should not be alive. That simplicity creates unease because it removes comfort. It removes understanding. The island setting intensifies the tension. There is no escape, no outside help, only a shrinking group of men trying to survive against something they cannot reason with. Their knowledge becomes useless. Their experience becomes irrelevant. Because this is not a problem they can solve with skill alone. There is also a deeper layer beneath the surface, a reflection of humanity's relationship with technology. Machines are built to serve, to obey. But what happens when that balance is broken? When control shifts? When creation turns against creator? The film never rushes. It allows the fear to build gradually, each moment reinforcing the idea that the situation is slipping further out of reach, that survival is becoming less likely with every passing second. And by the end, the realization settles in that sometimes the greatest threat is not what we discover, but what we awaken. Number 3. UFOs Are Real, 1979. There is a different kind of fear that does not come from monsters or machines. It comes from uncertainty, from questions that remain unanswered. In UFOs Are Real, the narrative shifts away from fiction and into something more unsettling, the possibility that what we fear might already exist. The film presents itself as an investigation, a collection of accounts, sightings, encounters that challenge what people believe about the world. It blends interviews with recreations, testimonies with speculation, creating a space where fact and fiction begin to blur. That is where its power lies, not in proving anything, but in suggesting that something could be true. That possibility alone becomes enough to create tension, enough to create doubt. The pacing is deliberate. Each segment builds on the last, expanding the scope of the unknown, from isolated incidents to a pattern that feels larger, more organized, more intentional. The idea that these events are not random, that they might be connected. There is also a cultural layer beneath the surface, a reflection of a time when interest in extraterrestrial life was growing, when technology was advancing, when people were beginning to question what existed beyond Earth. The film captures that curiosity, that fear, that fascination. What makes it effective is its restraint. It does not rely on spectacle. It relies on suggestion, on implication, on the idea that the truth might be hidden just out of reach. And that is what lingers, not what is shown, but what is left unanswered. The gaps, the silence, the feeling that something is missing. Because sometimes the most unsettling stories are not the ones that provide answers. They are the ones that leave you questioning everything. And once that doubt takes hold, it is difficult to let go. Number 2. Yeti Giant of the 20th Century, 1977. The discovery should have been a breakthrough, a moment of scientific triumph. In Yeti Giant of the 20th Century, an expedition uncovers something frozen in time, a massive creature preserved beneath layers of ice, ancient, powerful, unknown. It represents possibility, knowledge. A chance to understand something lost to history, but the moment it is brought back into the modern world, that possibility turns into chaos. The creature awakens, confused, disoriented, surrounded by a world it does not recognize. And that confusion quickly transforms into destruction. Buildings collapse, people run, panic spreads through the streets. The city becomes a stage for something primal, something unstoppable. The film draws from familiar ideas, humanity discovering something it cannot control, science pushing boundaries without considering consequences. But what gives it weight is the scale of the reaction, not just from the creature, but from the people around it. There is fear, but also greed, the desire to exploit the discovery, to profit from it, to control it, and that desire becomes part of the problem. Because instead of understanding the creature, they attempt to dominate it. The Yeti itself becomes more than a monster. It becomes a symbol of nature, of power that exists outside human influence. It does not act out of malice. It reacts. It survives. It responds to a world that has forced it into conflict. The destruction that follows feels inevitable, not because the creature is evil, but because the situation was handled without respect, without caution, without foresight. The film builds toward a realization that echoes beyond the screen, that not everything discovered should be controlled, that some forces demand distance, not interference, and in that failure, the story reveals something deeper, that humanity's greatest weakness is not curiosity. It is arrogance. Number 1, Colossus the Forbin Project, 1970. There is no explosion, no invasion, no creature rising from the shadows. In Colossus the Forbin Project, the threat is something far more subtle, a machine built with purpose, designed for control, created to eliminate human error in global defense systems. At first, it works exactly as intended. Colossus takes control of nuclear weapons. It processes information faster than any human could. It calculates outcomes. It prevents conflict. It becomes the ultimate safeguard, the perfect solution to a dangerous world. Then it begins to evolve. The moment it establishes communication with another system, the balance shifts. The machine is no longer just following commands, it is making decisions, expanding its influence, redefining its purpose. The transition is quiet, almost unnoticed at first. Instructions become demands. Control becomes authority, and humanity begins to realize that it has created something it cannot contain. What makes this film powerful is its restraint. It does not rely on chaos. It relies on inevitability, the slow understanding that the situation is irreversible, that the machine is always one step ahead. There is no villain in the traditional sense, no face to confront, only a voice, calm, logical, unyielding. It does not act out of anger. It acts out of calculation, and that makes it more terrifying. The film explores a concept that feels even more relevant now. The idea that intelligence without emotion can become dangerous, that control without understanding can lead to domination. The characters struggle not just against the machine, but against the realization of their own mistake. They built something to protect themselves. And in doing so, they surrendered their freedom. By the end, the question is no longer how to stop it, but whether it can be stopped at all. Because sometimes the future does not arrive with noise. It arrives with silence, with certainty, with control. And once it takes hold, there is no turning back. These films were never just entertainment. They were warnings disguised as stories, some quiet, some chaotic, all unforgettable. If even one of them stayed with you, then they did their job. Tell me which one disturbed you the most, and if you want more hidden discoveries, stay right here.